Buenas and half a day. Thank you all for being here. The Committee on Education, Self-Determination, and Historic Preservation, Infrastructure, Border Safety, Federal and Foreign Affairs, and Maritime Transportation will now convene this public hearing relative to Bill numbers 2-36 LS and Bill number 46-36 COR. Today is Thursday, April 22nd, 2021, and the time is now 2:07 in the afternoon. For the record and in accordance with the open government law, public notices were sent out via email to all senators, stakeholders, and all main media broadcasting outlets on Wednesday, April 14, 2021, and the second notice on Monday, April 19, 2021. Notice of today's hearing was also available on the Guam Legislature's website. Joining me today for this public hearing are members of the legislature, Speaker Therese Terlaje, thank you, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Muña Barnes, Senator Chris Dueñas, Senator Tony Yada, Senator Telena. Thank you, senators, for being here today. Before we proceed with the public hearing, I would like to read some general rules of conduct. The general rules of conduct must be followed. All must abide by the rules of conduct and quality assurance standards. Please keep your video. This is a face-to-face hearing. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from this public hearing by our Sergeant of Arms. Today's public hearing will provide discussions on the following measures. Bill number 2-36 LS, sponsored by Vice Speaker Tina Rose Muña Barnes, Senator Pedo Terlaje, and Senator Anthony Ada, an act to add a new Article 5 to Chapter 50, Division 2, Title 2, Guam Code Annotated, relative to developing a plan to implement a transshipment industry through the creation of a transshipment task force. We will also discuss Bill number 46-36 COR, sponsored by Speaker Therese Terlaje and Senators Pedo Terlaje, Telena Cruz Nelson, and Christopher Dueñas. An act to amend subsection 66212 Charlie of Chapter 66, Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, relative to encouraging construction of homes by extending the validity of a building permit for a minimum of 12 months. Okay, half a day, everyone, and good afternoon. We will now start with Bill number 2-36 LS, and I would like to ask if anyone would. Is there anyone here to testify? If you can bring them in, please. I just want to say that I hope that everyone is listening, and hopefully this public hearing will shed some light on the importance of transshipments as an effective way of shipping cargo to their final destination, whether it be through large or small vessels. With the creation of a transshipment task force, Guam's port of entry can implement and monitor container cargo throughput from onboarding to arrival and release at final destination. I would like to invite the Vice Speaker to please introduce her bill. Thank you, Vice Speaker.
Madam Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present Bill 2-36 to our colleagues and to the listening community. I've introduced Bill number 2-36 back in January to look at how we can create a transshipment industry here on our island of Guam. Around the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has definitely changed the norm for many. We have lost loved ones, lost businesses, lost whole industries as the world combated COVID-19. But just as the ancient Chamorros, we are resilient, and we must look at ways so that we can overcome obstacles together. In that spirit, Madam Chair, and in my capacity as the Oversight chairwoman on regional affairs, I had wanted to see how Guam can step up and do our part for our people in our region. For most countries in Asia Pacific, shipping is the doorway to the global economy and a lifeline for social and economic development. For many of our brothers and sisters in the Blue Continent, when ports around the world shut down or imposed quarantine restrictions on ships, shipping lines simply refused to make stops at smaller volume routes to avoid mandatory quarantines. As a result, Pacific Island nations were cut off from the outside world, preventing them from accessing commodities, essential healthcare supplies, and their only source of income, which is the export of local goods such as fish and copra, also came to a halt. I have referenced, Madam Chair, in the findings and intent, 2 recent studies, COVID-19 and its impact on shipping and port sector in Asia and the Pacific, done by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, as well as the Impact 19 on logistics, done by the International Finance Corporation, a member of the World Bank Group. Both these reports not only point out a critical void in our region, but also provide short and long-term solutions. Quite frankly, Madam Chair, Guam is the only port who has implemented all the short-term solutions. As I read these reports, I realized that the crux of both studies are a couple key points, and I would like to discuss them briefly. First is the need to implement better technology to be used in the industry. Last term, along with my good colleague, Senator Mary Torres, we passed Public Law 35105 to close a 30-year gap in our code as it dealt with manifests and customs. While intended to better combat against international trafficking of narcotics, not only will Public Law 35105 help us better combat against the importation of drugs, but it is more importantly uses modern technology to better facilitate the processes for Guam customs and quarantine at the port. The second element, Madam Chair, is to look at a regional approach to filling this void. Guam's strategic location is not only an asset to the armed forces, but our location can be an asset to our economy and all those that call the Blue Continent home. Our deep water ports allow for ships of all sizes to make a call at the Jose de Leon Guerrero port of Guam. Furthermore, unlike other ports in our vicinity, we have a clinic at the port ready to respond to any emergency as needed. The third element is to make it attractive for shipping lines to change their current routes and accommodate Guam. This is the reason I picked GITA to maintain a key role with my proposal, as I believe our attractive QC program would entice multinational corporations to come to Guam. Guam's close proximity to Asia, as well as our attractive financial incentives, the protection for the industry by both the government of Guam and the United States government, as demonstrated throughout this COVID-19 pandemic, where Port Authority of Guam, Madam Chair, stayed open at 100%. We have a track record that demonstrates our Port Strong family and that our Port Strong family is capable to make new revenues for Guam. As we saw with the Teddy Roosevelt and more recently with the news release that Guam was a hub for getting COVID-19 relief to U.S. embassies throughout the Indo-Pacific over the last 2 months, throughout the pandemic, as multinational freight corporations changed their shipping routes, we saw an uptick in the number of cargo flights from China making a fuel stop on Guam en route to Australia and the entire Indo-Pacific region, delivering critical supplies for the fight against COVID-19 and keeping the global trade open. But it doesn't stop there, Madam Chair. What I see as a potential opportunity for Guam, and I had discussed this with the previous Trump administration and got their initial support, as well as the Biden administration, when I met with their senior advisor for economic recovery, is to not only use Guam as a shipping hub, but also as an assembly point for raw materials. With Guam being a U.S. territory, it would be beneficial to assemble goods here, as the source market for raw materials is right in our backyard, and that the finished product would not be subject to import taxes into the United States. The reason why I proposed this task force is because when the previous Trump administration spoke to me, they asked me, Speaker, what do you need from us to make this happen? At that point, it was clear that we need a clear plan, and we need our entire government and private sector on Guam to be on the same page so that we can then talk to the National Trade Council, the National Economic Council, and the entire federal government to ensure that Guam is included in the bilateral trade agreements with foreign governments. Madam Chair, our economy is at a standstill. We've learned from COVID-19 that we cannot put all our eggs in one basket. We've learned from COVID-19 that we must diversify our economy, and this bill not only does that, but it also allows for the prosperity and the survival of our entire blue continent, and has the potential of providing our people of Guam high-paying jobs that we so desperately need. I want to thank you for hosting this hearing. I want to thank my co-sponsors, Senator Pedo, Terlaje, and Tony Ada, Senator Ada, for supporting me in this initiative. And if I may, I would like to enter the 2 reports I referenced, as well as the written testimonies from the Guam Chamber of Commerce, who in their statement said it best. The proposed transshipment industry and establishment of a manufacturing hub has merit and has been long talked about, but has not been fully vetted as the potential revenue source and viable source for employment, not only for our island residents, but for the whole region. And I would also like to add a written testimony of Governor Therese, whom I've learned firsthand from as a former member of his administration, a man who's overcome economic and natural disasters during his tenure. In his testimony, he said he is right when he states that this is an intriguing and forward-looking transshipment industry development measure. But as he taught me, when the times are tough, this is why our people elected us to serve. We must roll up our sleeves, get creative, and think outside the box, and get it done. I'm in support of this I am in support of his proposed amendment to include representation from the Chinese Chamber, Guam Chinese Chamber, Guam Korean Chamber of Commerce, and the Filipino community of Guam. I know that these organizations are made up of people who have made our island Guam their home and want to make our island more prosperous. So, Madam Chair, I know it was long, but we've been working on this for a very long time, and I truly appreciate you having this hearing today, and I hope that I can garner our colleagues to look at this effort the same way and give it its support. So, for giving me the time.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker Barnes. At this time, we will call on the former First Lady, Joanne Camacho, to give testimony.
Yes. Hafa, good afternoon. Senator Nelson and members of the Committee on Education, Self-Determination, Historic Preservation, Infrastructure, Border Safety, Federal and Foreign Affairs, and Maritime Transportation, Speaker Therese Terlaje, Vice Speaker Tina Muña Barnes, Senator Tony Ada, Senator Chris Dueñas, Senator Tello Tidegway, and Senator Joanne Brown. The Guam Economic Development Authority is generally supportive of the efforts that promote the growth of our local economy. In the area of transportation, Governor Lou Leon Guerrero implemented her economic working group with multiple subcommittees. Ship repair and safe haven as 2 potential areas of growth within the transportation industry. In addition, prior to the pandemic, GITA was actively co-chairing the Small Cruise Ship Task Force, which resulted in meaningful discussions with regional partners and a grant application to the U.S. Economic Development Administration for the feasibility study to continue its implementation. The complications to the travel industry as a result of the pandemic have since stalled the efforts of the task force on both the local front and the federal front. In addition, the isolation brought on by the pandemic has slowed our conversation with our regional partners on this initiative. Lastly, the U.S. EDA did not approve its grant request as their attention was focused on economic recovery in tourism versus emerging markets. Economic diversification initiatives will be instrumental in ensuring a strong and prosperous economy. The creation of a transshipment task force can help the government of Guam determine the feasibility and possible success of such an industry in Guam. If and when Bill 2-36 is enacted, Guam Economic Development Authority will do its best to participate fully in the task force as mandated by the bill. As it stands, resources with this initiative are not available, but perhaps by folding some of the group's projects and initiatives with existing efforts in the Governor's Economic Working Group, we will be able to share resources, human capital, financial, and otherwise. The task force may need more time to secure funding and carry out its specialized work, such as environmental, engineering, maritime law areas of expertise. Nonetheless, the Guam Economic Development Authority can work with colleagues on the task force to seek additional funding through federal partners. Similar to the efforts since the start of the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration with the U.S. Economic Development Administration, we were able to secure funding on expand healthcare training at the University of Guam, opportunity for farmers to sell at village markets, and aquaculture commercial feasibility assessment through this agency. This will likely be among the first sources we seek aid for this initiative in the coming months. Overall, we are happy that our lawmakers see economic diversification as a priority. We sincerely hope that as you design legislation along these lines, you will also keep us in your thoughts and planning with regards to preserving any existing funding sources we currently have in place. Thank you for this opportunity to present this testimony on Bill 2-36. If you have any further questions, please feel free to contact Melanie Mendiola, our CEO and Administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority, or myself, Deputy Administrator. Thank you, and Zazuz Masi.
Thank you, First Lady Camacho. We'll now call on Mr. Rory Respicio, and then Carl, you're next.
Half a day, buenas and half a day. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of your committee. I am submitting this written testimony in my official capacity as General Manager of the Port Authority of Guam, registering our support for Bill number 2-36, which is sponsored by Vice Speaker Tina Rose Muña Barnes, Senators Jose Pedo Terlaje, and D. Anthony Atta. Prior to 2020, our main economic drivers were tourism and the military buildup as a result of the realignment of the U.S. Marine Forces to Guam. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit our island, we saw the shutdown of tourism and many businesses closing, leaving thousands of our residents unemployed. In response to our island's current state of the economy, Governor Leon Guerrero and Lieutenant Governor Joshua Tenorio, in partnership with the Guam Economic Development Authority and the Guam Chamber of Commerce, impaneled the Economic Diversification Working Group. This working group identified new industries to rebound from the adverse effects of COVID-19 pandemic. In 2019, Governor Leon Guerrero and her fellow chief executives of Micronesia convened the 24th Micronesian Islands Forum and collectively committed to establishing closer ties, strengthening cooperation, and they also agreed on initiatives that mutually benefit our entire Micronesian region. In line with this commitment is a key initiative of the Leon Guerrero Tenorio Transition Committee regarding the Port Authority of Guam. That initiative is to establish a tiered fee tied to the transshipment volumes of fuel for the petroleum companies and to identify and pursue initiatives to develop the fuel capacity at the port. Such initiatives to current and prospective petroleum providers would allow the continued storage of transshipment fuel on the island and hopefully would also see the savings passed on to our Micronesian neighbors. The other initiative we are pursuing is implementing Public Law 28-92, which I sponsored together with Vice Speaker Tina Rose Muña Barnes and other senators in the 27th Guam Legislature, and then became law in 2005. Public Law 28-92 established a recycling enterprise zone by setting aside 10 acres of Port Authority of Guam property. The commitment to fully implementing the recycling enterprise zone is also memorialized in the Leon Guerrero Tenorio Transition Committee report and supported by the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration and our board of directors. We all acknowledge that a significant environmental concern of our community is the absence of effective recycling and disposal operations, which has resulted in a proliferation of abandoned automobiles, white goods, and metallic waste, thus creating a serious threat to our island's aquifer. These efforts could be covered in Bill 2-36LS should it pass the 36th Guam legislature and be signed into law by Governor Leon Guerrero. Madam Chair, as you are aware, we have been proactively working toward providing a balanced modernization program to address improvements, sustainability projects, and financial self-sufficiency. The port has in its land bank more than 600 acres along routes 11 and 18. Some of the acreages, subject to the appropriate legislative and administrative approvals, can be used for warehousing infrastructures to transport recycled materials or import manufactured products for transshipment to the United States or our Micronesian neighbors. Establishing a viable manufacturing hub on Guam would address any shortfalls in our supply chain being felt from time to time in the United States. In turn, the port would serve as a viable and secure port for goods to flow from manufacturing hubs in the Indo-Pacific region and into the United States. Once again, the creation of this task force, if passed by this legislature and signed into law by Governor Leon Guerrero, will indeed bridge Guam with our neighbors throughout Micronesia. The results of a transshipment task force will further strengthen our region's economy and benefit the populations of the other islands of the Western Micronesian region, namely the Federated States of Micronesia, Palau, Marshall Islands, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. This bill could not have come to a better time for us as leaders of this island to set the foundation needed to implement the initiatives that would diversify our island's economy and expand job opportunities for our people and our brothers and sisters from throughout the region. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of your legislative committee, for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of Bill 2-36LS. Please let us know if you have any questions or concerns specific to this issue or any issue you would like us to address. Situs Maasi.
Thank you, General Manager Respicio. Carl Pangilinan, you're now invited to give testimony.
Buenas and good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman Nelson and all the present members today of the 36th Guam Legislature. Hard to follow those two. I was hoping you would let me go first, Madam Chairperson. But I'll go ahead and continue. My name is Carl Pangilinan, and I come to testify in favor of Bill 2-36LS, an act to add a new Article 5 to Chapter 50, Division 2, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to developing a plan to implement a transshipment industry through the creation of a transshipment task force. I'm currently the Director of Business and Market Development for American President Lines, APL. But I've also had many differing positions throughout my career, leading to my qualifications for giving testimony relative to the bill being heard today. Bill 2-36's intent to establish a transshipment task force to further the creation of industry is something I support wholeheartedly, both personally and professionally. Its legislative intent is filled with great background, and it's a true cause for movement forward of this bill as it's written. Guam has gone far too long as a two-trick pony, military and tourism. We're overdue in creating the vital third leg of our economy for added diversification. This bill sets out to accomplish that objective. They say you can't teach location. It's the very reason we benefit from the two leading industries on island thus far. That same strength comes into play when initiating a transshipment industry for Guam. Now, 2020 was a stress test in so many ways. It stretched certain sectors beyond their limits. These tests shed light on many glaring holes within the global trade and shipping industry. Now, more than ever, we're seeing the need to shore up transportation infrastructure, as General Manager Respicio stated earlier, and be a more viable player in the logistics space. The supply chain has gone through a shift which will allow Guam to truly play a strategic part in the now and very near future. It's been decades since Guam has exported any products to any destination. This forgotten industry has been plaguing our businesses and residents with the challenge of being a one-way shipping lane. Being in the industry myself, I see firsthand just how the economics of the price of shipping a container from anywhere into Guam is. The vessels arrive heavy and they leave light. Transshipment opens up the potential for a manufacturing industry here on Guam, leading to much needed exports, which will have multiple benefits throughout the economy. The creation of this task force and its one-year time frame upon enactment to submit a plan to Imagahagan Guahan fits nicely into the need to establish new industry and to move quickly. The bill is well written as it was submitted. I feel all the pertinent players comprising the task force are included, and knowing the individuals involved, I'm very confident that a very useful report will rise up out of this group. Thank you so much for your time, Madam Chairperson, and Sejus Masi, and I'll stick around for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pangilinan. I believe that we do have some members in the foyer that are here to just witness the testimonies and support the bill, but they are not going to give any oral testimony at this time. Correct? Okay. All right, so now we will proceed with the questions. We'll start with the Vice Speaker, and then we'll go with Speaker Terlaje, and then move down the line. Oh, forgive me. I'd like to, at this time, recognize Senator Brown. Thank you, Senator Brown, for joining us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to note, Madam Chair, for the record, that the review from the Bureau of Budget and Management Research notes that there will be no major impact on the government of Guam. However, it was noted by Gita in the review that should a task force explore economic opportunities and/or research projects, there may be insufficient financial resources to accommodate these activities. And as I see the Port family down there and Gita and of course APL, my question would be that I know that Guam has received resources from the American Rescue Plan, and I wanted to get maybe the government's perspective to see if resources could be utilized in the event Gita were to facilitate, or the Port to facilitate these efforts forward. And is that a possibility?
Although the way the funds are going to be used have not really been submitted by the governor or finalized, I believe that as Rory here and myself, that we will work together. We will work as one government to do what's right for Guam.
Thank you. Thank you. Manager Rory?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Speaker, Speaker Tina. Although there is no funding in this bill, I guess through the legislative process, you might work toward identifying some funding source. And I do recall the governor has written to Speaker Terlaje and all members of the legislature, inviting all of you guys to come together and submit some ideas on how that 600, I believe it's $634 million. It was 661, but it's whatever that amount is. There's a process that the governor has identified, and perhaps this could be a vehicle, but that would be something that would have to be worked out through yourselves and through Imagahaga.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure, as we literally look at a lot of the reports and assessments that were done in the past on how Guam could move forward in the transshipment industry, we've come to this journey in the road where, again, another possibility of moving forward, but yet probably lacking the financial resources to get things implemented. So I'm really glad that it was at least brought to the forefront so that we can make sure that as we look for opportunities for our residents to get jobs, and as we look at bringing new industries in and showing that, like I said earlier, the Port Authority, the Port Strong family did not close. We are the only port that did not close during the pandemic and still open today. I think that it just shows a great sign for us to succeed even further. So Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask that question, and I just hope my colleagues could support the efforts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Speaker Terlaje, do you have any questions or comments for the panel?
Well, just to follow up on that question regarding funding, funding is needed for the task force, is what you're proposing?
Madam Speaker, I can't say whether funding is needed at this point in time until the task force gets together, but I'm sure anything that develops and comes through it, that it will be communicated directly to the legislature as well as the governor in support of whatever is needed.
All right. There's an article in the Post, I think today, that talks about GITA is still waiting for the governor to approve its $37.8 million request out of the federal subsidy granted by the American Rescue Plan. And that GITA has plans for that money, so I don't know if it's for task force assistance, but they seem to have other plans, but maybe you can consider if you do get that money. It looks like you are making direct requests for that money as well, in addition to what the legislature might put into its request. But I guess, could you just explain, Mr. Pangilinan, what do you believe, from your experience, is going to be the primary task of the task force? What is the impediment that they're trying to get over?
Thank you for your question, Madam Speaker. To further understand, your question is asking what is the major impediment that the task force will be sort of created to overcome?
Yes.
Well, the major impediment actually is just the undiversification of our current economy. Like I said earlier in my testimony, we're basically a two-trick pony, and we've seen over time. I personally have sat in the chair and been responsible for Guam's tourism, and we've seen how fragile that industry is. And in 2020, like I stated earlier, many different sectors were really put to a stress test, and economies fell, economies suffered, business hurt, business is still hurting. And if we're just able to establish, like I mentioned, a third leg in the economy, we won't be so reliant. I mean, thank goodness we've got Uncle Sam to help carry us through these tough times. We've our own personal business. I mean, we've seen the shift of cargo go from retail to a lot of project cargo. And that said, if we just established an additional leg of our industry, and in this case, transshipment, which would hopefully an export industry could be born out of, a manufacturing industry could be born out of. Not only would that create jobs here in Guam, which are much needed, it would diversify the economy, but from the shipper's perspective, I did mention how we're basically a one-lane shipping route. We come in heavy and we leave light, and each of those containers actually bear the cost for the full round trip. And so the benefits will be spread throughout if we were able to fill those ships on the outbound. So I hope I was sort of able to answer your question with that.
Well, I definitely understand the benefits, I think, of transshipment and why the Vice Speaker has been so, working on this for many years, as she says. So the benefits is not what I want to be convinced of. It's what is stopping us now. I just don't think it's been made clear on the record today as to what is the job of the task force. What is it that's stopping us from having a transshipment? Now, you said that the export industry will grow out of a transshipment industry, not vice versa. Like, we don't need to create a product that we're going to transship, that this industry can function without that, right? So how is it going to function? What's preventing that function right now? It's not that, Guam doesn't want to diversify its economy, so I want you to make it clear to, everyone, what is the impediment to this? And any one of you can answer this, hopefully, but Mr. Pangilinan, I'm asking you because you are in the shipping industry, right. And so what is it that's preventing the shipping industry from expanding in this way?
I mean, so, okay, now the question is a little clearer, Madam Speaker. And, I think to help answer that, we just kind of need to take a snapshot of how we're doing things today. And with regard to how we're doing things today, being one of the larger users at the port, I do want to commend Mr. Vespicio and his fantastic team. Like Madam Vice Speaker said, they stayed on, they kept the lights on, they kept operating. Throughout the pandemic, we were the only port that didn't shut down. Can we be a little better? Can we be a little more efficient? Can we streamline? Absolutely. I mean, I think that goes with just about, any industry, any business, any government service. And I think that therein lies the need to sort of reinvest into our transshipment infrastructure. I haven't seen the latest with the port master plan, but the improvements that we are seeing to date have been phenomenal. And they're just making the job of bringing in cargo and hopefully the potential of exporting out cargo that much easier to process. And so, the more we invest in our infrastructure, I think the better we are in terms of, handling our current load as well as growth.
Okay, so you're suggesting that we just need to build it into our capacity at
Correct.
the port and our infrastructure,
Right.
and make that more efficient and bigger.
Not
But
so much the hardware, but even the systems.
Yes,
We
okay.
can get smarter with our systems and have them. There's a lot of moving parts when it
Okay.
comes to shipping a container, and there's a lot of different government agencies that actually touch the paperwork.
Okay.
And if we can do a smarter part with regard to how we handle that,
Okay.
maybe invest in the systems and start to automate certain things, we can get that much more efficient.
All right, and does either of you have anything to add as to, what is, why hasn't it happened prior to this, if that's the only impediment?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker, for the question. In reading the proposed legislation and what the Vice Speaker and others are attempting to do, I think what it does for all of us, it has a coordinated effort. And this bill would bring all the key players together. From the port's perspective, I could tell you that the port is ready and the port will be ready. We're going through a port modernization plan, and Senator Brown, as former general manager, knows how extensive and how aggressive that plan is, to also prepare ourselves for the military build-up construction period. But I think that why the port's supportive of this, because we would have a coordinated effort with the governor also a part of this effort, a critical part of this effort, GITA, the airport, the stakeholders, the private industry. As I said, there's about 600 acres of property at the port that we could leverage together with any incentives that GITA can provide through current laws such as the QC program. I believe there was a time when President Trump wanted to or imposed additional taxes on solar panels, for instance. And there was some discussion within our community that if those items can be brought in individually, manufactured locally, exported out of Guam, you'll generate jobs, you'll generate taxes from all of that activity. And so this bill puts everybody at the table, just as we did with the Guam First Commission, other very important task forces. For me, I don't see it as another task force that's going to end up doing nothing. It just depends on what the will is. And if the will is to truly stand up transshipment, and also the port will be a part of this, because if there's some gaps in operations, in maintenance requirements, in manpower challenges, we can put that as part of our projection in what we need to do to accommodate not only the throughput that's going to come in, but the throughput that would be going out. And so that's what I have to offer today.
All right, so I'm glad to hear that the port is going to be able to accommodate this with their current modernization plans and efforts. And but you're suggesting that it's something that we need to attract through the use of property or a QC or additional efforts, and that there's that is
Yeah.
what this task force might need to do as a task,
Yeah,
is to make it more attractive than it currently is, and that there is no other impediment. It's just,
Yeah, things like that, and that I'm sure will be all part of the feasibility study, which will be submitted. And as First Lady Joanne pointed out in her testimony, maybe we can also cover over things like the cruise ship industry, and there's areas at the port that's been identified as opportunity zones. And so if we put all those things together and create this portfolio, I think it'll be easier and more effective for GITA to go out as they market the economic, potential economic growth for the island.
all right, well, I'm sorry. Can I just ask you one more time, Madam Chair, if you don't mind? One more question. Then, Mr. Pangilinan, we have shipping companies already here. So I guess I want to know from them if what is their hesitation, I guess, or what is it that they need? Are they saying they needed a QC in order to do this? Are they saying they needed land? I didn't hear that. I'm hearing, yeah, I just want that to be very clear.
Yeah, very good question. Is this on? I guess just to clarify and to, until the task force is established, we'll see what they identify as some of the critical points and objectives. But currently, there are a number of global carriers that do service our ports right now. And I think what we're trying to say, I mean, it's not that we're asking for some sort of tax benefit or tax break with regard to the QC. I think it's more so on the manufacturing end. And this is where Mr. Respicio brings up the opportunity with property to lease commercially, maybe right there at the port or even at our own airport, where in that report that the Vice Speaker cited, I think it says early on, and it talks simply about like the iPhone that maybe a couple of or most of you are using right now, and how like a simple iPhone has 200 different components that come in from all over the place. I mean, it's made and manufactured in one area, but 200 separate components fly in or get trucked in or get shipped in from varying places, and from there, they manufacture one product, an iPhone. And so similar to that, if we're to kind of create some sort of industry, I mentioned how strategically located we are. We can take raw goods from the north, from Korea, from China, from Taiwan, from the Philippines, bring them here into Guam and maybe sell them down to Australia. I mean, that's when business will take over and figure out, what's the smartest thing to do for them. And so with regard to the current structure of the shipping lines and what we're able to offer currently, I think we service the area quite well, and we service the needs for the businesses and the consumers. I think what this bill is intent is just to create some sort of additional industry and additional manufacturing through transshipment that would just grow the economy and establish a third leg, if you will.
Okay, then maybe that helps to clarify for me then, because I'm thinking of just the shipping part of it, and that all the other benefits are separate, right? That they are created independent. Like, we've received several proposals of, receiving parts, as you say, from Taiwan, bringing them to Guam, have products made in Guam, and of course, but I guess don't see that as a transshipment industry as something else, a manufacturing industry or whatever. But I understand they all work together. But I just wanted to make it clear, currently there's not an impediment to transshipment per se. There's not a legal impediment. There's not a capacity impediment right now either. That's great. And it's just we're looking for additional product to transship is what you're suggesting, Mr. Pangilinan, perhaps, and that would, as a package, create a more viable or global transshipment industry. And
yes, ma'am.
I appreciate that. All right, and thank you very much, Madam Chair, and to all of you for your testimony.
Thank you, Speaker Terlaje. I'll call on now Senator Dueñas. Do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Carl, I think that we made you last because we wanted to make sure you stuck around. You're a valuable resource. So you mentioned on your current experience shipping, coming in heavy, leaving light. I've been working on that myself. It's not working out so well, but I just thought I'd bring a little humor. No, I remember when in the Camacho administration, under the Workforce Investment Board, and then moving into the Cabo administration, one thing we were able to do was working with, in this idea of transshipment, was in the networking in Washington, D.C., and when the annual meetings take place for the Workforce Investment Board, you have a lot of businesses that come through. And actually, the vice president of Nike came into Guam because of the fact that, and I believe they're doing some of this right now through the bonded warehousing and other warehousing opportunities, because they wanted to be first to market a lot of times with their emerging products. And one of the impediments going stateside is there's a lot of backlog for getting, the inspections and everything else done to where they can get their shoes and other apparel and everything out to market. But coming through Guam, because Guam is a U.S. port, those clearances are done. And so basically they can fly in, from the Asian region, warehouse or drop off those materials and then use other airlines going U.S. to be able to get that to market faster than landing maybe in L.A. or somewhere else and having that situation. So that's kind of what I think where we're going here with this. So that's what I'm thinking. Carl, do you see, that opportunity expanding because maybe some, as you said, regional liners that are coming here that don't, either because of restrictions or because of other reasons, just not being a long haul going U.S., maybe piggybacking on your boats and having, or maybe even assembling some stuff here that will end up on one of your boats going back on your round trip home. Is that kind of where we're going? 'Cause I'm trying to follow on with the speaker, but I think I have an idea of what this whole opportunity might bring.
Yeah, I think you guys are all sort of, plugging in the pieces for what the big picture actually is. And, you cited a couple of reports that I do personally remember, very closely when I sat for 2 years as GITA administrator. That was one of the things that I was really most excited about doing was industry development. And one of the first things I did was I sat down with my team and I said, okay, what are some of the opportunities? What are the low-hanging fruits? And there was a study that was done. I can't remember exactly how it was commissioned or what shook out of it, but there was a study that was done that actually looked at the viability of exactly what you said with regard to bonded warehousing and the fact that these large manufacturers, and in this case, someone like Nike, could utilize U.S. ports and the U.S. laws and the benefit of all of that, even to the point where, however it's qualified, to be able to say made in the USA if things were even manufactured here. But yeah, that in a nutshell is basically what part of what I believe this task force will try to accomplish. And again, there's a lot of attention played on the seaport, but our own airport is actually another very huge opportunity for moving this type of industry forward.
Yeah, so yeah, I think maybe First Lady and maybe Senator Respicio also in this vein, basically, I think the thing here is heighten the profile, get the word out, because then, when you draw that kind of attraction, when the bigger companies start to go, wait, Guam is pushing forward on their through port capabilities, being that kind of middle road of a U.S. jurisdiction between the mainland and other, maybe even farther reaching, wherever the mainland also goes out to, and maybe into Europe and other destinations. So I think it's a unique opportunity, But I just wanted to see if you folks wanted to kind of discuss, you know, heightening the profile, and if that's what you see in terms of your role.
I think it's certainly that would happen, and the timing is right, and the opportunity is now. Of course, there's been discussions in the past, but because of the situation we're in, create that other industry would be great. But you know, the reason why the task force is important is because we have to do some studies on it. What type of industry, what type of products, what type of commodities will we want to attract or allow? And as stated earlier too, you know, we have to do some environmental studies. We have to do some engineering to make sure that how we manage this will benefit us as well. And you know, there's some laws, maritime laws, that we need to also, you know, look into, because we just can't, as a U.S. port, we just can't bring anything here and then export it out. You know, so we have to do all of that. So that's why the task force is very important, and I think it's timely that we do it. And you know, we get your support to be able to move forward. Of course, we'd like some of you to be involved in the task force to have a good understanding of why we're doing it and what's needed for Guam. We spoke about opportunity zones. Yes, because it would be, which area in the port do you do this? Is it going to be, I think, like when Nike came here, also I remember when my husband was governor, we visited DHL. They wanted to come here to open more like a distribution center, you know? And so this is the kind of thing that we need to think more widely and see whether it's an opportunity for us to expound on, which will create employment at the end and benefit our island. And I think being America and Asia, vice versa, Asia and America, you know, the gateway, it's a plus for Guam.
Yeah, I agree with you, Senator Chris, that I believe this is what this bill is all about, heightened opportunity to generate a portfolio that it could be used to market some of these industries. Yeah, thank you.
That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank
Chief
you.
Masi. Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Dueñas. Senator Tony Ada?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the panel for being here to give their testimony. And I think, Madam Chair, if I may ask to, you know, the Guam Visitors Bureau had submitted testimony that falls in line, I believe, with what you guys have also testified on. And if I may, Madam Chair, to read the testimony into the record?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. Dear Madam Vice Speaker, thank you for welcoming my testimony in support of your intriguing and forward-looking transshipment industry development legislation. If signed into law and enforced, Bill 2-36 LS will close critical gaps in Guam's economic recovery. Through Governor Lou Leongaro's integrated engagement of agribusiness, aquaculture, and the Guam product sale, local manufacturing and duty-free exportation remain vital components of her intermodal logistics vision. The governor knows these factors help diversify the economy, increase the production and sell Guam-made goods, spur employment, lubricate the financial environment with liquidity, credit, savings, and assets, produce new revenue streams, and control reverse logistics costs by helping shipping companies fill the high number of empty containers constantly departing Guam. Most importantly, she knows sustainable production, green packaging, and efficient delivery systems will go a long way in supporting her vision of a diversified economy. A critical component, the aim of your transshipment task force would help the Leongaro-Tenorio administration accomplish these diversification goals by establishing Guam as a manufacturing and transshipment hub. Congruently, Bill 2-36 encourages the U.S. to make better use of the Jose D. Leongaro Commercial Port and A.B. Wampat International Airport to help protect the maritime transportation system from vulnerabilities exposed during the worst throes of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this makes perfect sense. Guam's only commercial seaport is a designated U.S. strategic port. Our only commercial airport operates the closest U.S. aviation terminal to Southeast Asia. and the Department of Defense has seen fit to build Navy, Air Force, National Guard, and Marine Corps bases here on island while maintaining active Coast Guard and merchant marine operations. Especially during a global crisis, Guam's role as an enhanced MTS could limit supply chain disruptions, maintain medical supply inventories, relieve closures and congestions at regional ports of entry, help prevent food shortages across the Pacific Hemisphere, and even provide rations and furnish goods for the U.S. Armed Forces and our regional allies. And as an established transit hub for centuries, how truly today is Guam described as America in Asia and the gateway to Micronesia? Madam Vice Speaker, approximately 2 years ago, you and your team enterprisingly reached out to me and my Office of Economic Development, National and International Affairs for guidance in optimizing Guam's undercultivated territorial eligibility for participation in the Federal General Head Note 3A4 program and duty-free generalized system of preference. My researchers and I answered in writing your thoughtful questions about how it would take, what it would take for interested businesses to leverage these manufacturing and export programs designed for the economic advantage of small territories and possessions like Guam. Today, I remind this committee that during the era of upheaval and adjustment, witnessing the Great Pacific Pivot, forced realignment, the military buildup in Guam and Tinian, and the COVID-19 pandemic engulfing our planet, that Guam not need be a pawn, but can be a player in the season of change and opportunity. In particular, the federally certified Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program may offer keen insight and substantial grant support for resourceful entrepreneurs who are open to supplying niche defense manufacturing imperatives. I encourage aspiring local assemblers and exporters to explore such opportunities with Director Vera Tapasca and her team at the Community Defense Liaison Office in Agana. Under the broad vision of Governor Leon Guerrero and the cooperative efforts of local stakeholders, Destination Guam USA continues to lay the groundwork for a revitalized economy. And within the governor's unfolding strategy, local agribusiness, agriculture, and manufacturing stand to generate new export markets and finally fill up all those outbound cargo holds that leave Guam daily. Right in sync with this trend, an integrated new network of state-of-the-art hardware and software will close the gaps on lost inspection time, illicit drug smuggling, tax evasion, human trafficking, and invasive species. Once fully operational, the nexus will connect our ports of entry with customs officials, tax collectors, and shipping companies, all on demand, via a common cloud-based interface. This emerging system would digitally track passengers, crew, and freight from embarkation to arrival. And it will protect our borders with real-time data analysis while capturing the taxable accounts receivable necessary to help keep our airport, seaport, and land fields fully funded and bordered secure. Thanks to a collaborative effort between the Office of the Governor, Guam Customs and Quarantine, the Guam International Airport Authority, and Guam Visitors Bureau, the intake of electronic passenger declaration forms is already operational at the airport. The elimination of paper forms even allows travelers to fill in requisite passenger data online well before boarding their flights. This hastens the safe processing of arrivals and will slash long lines once package group tours begin arriving from Guam's Asia source markets again. Furthermore, thanks to Governor Leon Guerrero's October 2020 approval of legislation proffered by Senators Mary Camacho Torres and Joe S. San Augustine and yourself, Madam Vice Speaker, Guam law now requires the electronic submission of aircraft and ship manifests well in advance of arrivals. The governor's logistics strategy seeks to improve and protect Destination Guam's intermodal profile as an efficient critical link in the vast network connecting and conveying passengers and freight across the Pacific and safely getting them to our shores. Bill 2-36, relative to developing a plan to implement a transshipment industry, through the creation of a transshipment task force is among recent legislation whose programming content will give rise to a new logistical sub-industries to be built over the new digital landscape. Last December, Governor Leon Guerrero signed two of Senator Jim Camacho Moylan's logistic industry impetus bills into law, one of them offering qualifying certificate incentives to entice the establishment of transformation, distribution, and fulfillment centers operation in Guam. The other offers QC to hasten the compliant development of the burgeoning drone aircraft industry on island. For the last couple of years and longer, several entities have been actively engaged in modernizing Guam's infrastructure and onboarding new technologies, including the Office of the Governor, the Guam State Clearinghouse, Community Defense Liaison Office, Guam Legislature, Office of Congressman Michael F. Gilson-Nicholas, Department of Administration, Department of Revenue and Taxation, Office of Technology, Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency, Guam International Airport Authority, Port Authority of Guam, Port Users Group of Guam, and various other public and private collaborators. Together, we are integrated cloud-based platforms for faster, security-enhanced throughputs that improve the screening of passengers and contraband, that enhance threat detection, and that assures higher tax revenue capture. In support of capital improvements and digitalization, GovGuam offices, divisions, departments, and agencies are also actively identifying and retaining federal funding sources to effectively underwrite the cost of our concerted efforts. And definitely recognizing the need to diversify our economy for post-pandemic recovery, Bill 2-36 takes the logical step in the modernization and productive output of Guam's ports of entry. Yet, inasmuch as a draft legislation now under review seeks to sell to consumers in the Asian market quickly, I suggest that the composition of the Transition Task Force include representation from Guam's Chinese Chamber of Commerce, the Korean Chamber of Commerce, the Filipino community of Guam. This would be in addition to the bill's specified representation from the Guam Chamber of Commerce, the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce, while the GCOC and the GWCC boast impressive memberships from broad cross-sections of our community, there can be no substitute for open dialogue with the local organizations most closely tied to trade across China, Hong Kong, Kowloon, Macau, Taiwan, South Korea, and the Philippines, while attempting to understand Asian demands, engage unfolding Asian trends, and gain rapid access to niche Asian markets. Madam Vice Speaker, please notify me whenever I may be of further assistance to the legislature in making additional worthwhile progress in the areas of trade, commerce, and maritime transportation. Mr. Serementi, Honorable Carl T.C. Gutierrez, President and CEO, Guam Visitors Bureau, Chairman, Guam Economic Strategy Council, and the Perimeter Zone. And I think it was very important to read that into the record so that we can understand where all this comes together and how we can all play an important part of diversifying our economy. That, First Lady, do you have any
And I think that really shows the importance of how we, the government agencies, are working together to do, to support the bill and, to improve our economy.
Yes, definitely. And Carl, this was, I think, looking back at your testimony and the governor's testimony from that I just read into the record, looking at the inbound cargo and outbound empties that go daily or weekly, whatever it may be, how it can play an important part in building that transshipment hub here. So I think when we look at how we can diversify, I think this just opens up the doors to ensure that we can look at different avenues of how we can do it, what we need to do, and the different agencies that need to collaborate together to make it happen. So thank you guys for your testimony. Madam Chair, I thank you for your patience in my reading into the record of the governor's testimony. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Atta. Senator Tello Taitigui, do you have any questions? Colleagues, I just want to kindly remind everyone that we also have another bill that we are hearing during this public hearing. And then Uh, Immediately after, we're going into an oversight hearing at 3:30, so please be mindful of the time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to ask some questions. And, I agree that anything that we can do to, diversify our economy, and try to move towards something other than tourism is very helpful. This is very interesting on transshipment, because when I read about it, and try to understand the concept of it and trying to find where the jobs are being put in place, I think it just boils down to being able to have the facilities in order to do this. And then I do know that we had the opportunity to take a tour with Customs at the Port Authority, and the expansion needed, just for the containers coming in, that it will double in size, a little bit more than double in size of what they currently have that Customs is using. And then we come into this situation here when we're looking at something, a task force, which I'm a fan of task force, I created two last year. But, this comes to a point on task force itself, and this is to you, First Lady, as the Deputy General Manager at GITA, I know you guys are tasked with quite a bit of work regarding task force. And I think just last year, if I'm not mistaken, there are several task force that was implemented: the hospital task force, the fiber optic cable task force, the insurance for Tumon Bay task force, the senior citizen, task force. And of those that I just mentioned alone, none of them have had a meeting, if I'm not mistaken. I know the hospital task force hasn't, and I know that the fiber optic cables has not had a meeting that was implemented by law, that was created in the 35th, and it's unfortunate. So, I'm kind of concerned, because if this bill were to pass as a task force, moving forward, would this have priority over the other task force that was implemented that have not been implemented at all?
Senator Tyree, I appreciate your question and concern. I do know that the hospital task force has met twice.
Which one?
The hospital task force has met twice.
They have not met twice, because I did just speak with Melody a couple days ago, and found out what was meeting was the healthcare group, kind of like your working group that you mentioned in your testimony. That has met, but I have not heard of the hospital itself. It's called the healthcare. If I'm not mistaken, I know that the speaker knows of the name of the healthcare, but it was not the hospital task force that was implemented by law in the 35th Guam legislature.
Oh, okay.
I know which one you're talking about, but this was, that was formulated by GITA and the governor's office, and within her purview. But as far as the task force that was implemented by law, was not.
Okay, I'll certainly get clarification.
And the fiber optic cable task force was not as well. So I guess to my question is, if this bill becomes law, will the other task force that was before this legislation have its time in the sun and to be reviewed? Or are you going to put this at the front of the line?
I think every task force is important. I will get clarification because I'm under the impression that the working group or the task force that we're working with at the hospital encompasses what your task force mandated. I'll clarify that, though. We'll get back to you on that respect as far as that task force.
Yeah.
Now, the cable thing, I believe, also have met, but again, I'll have to validate because that's not on my. I'm not part of that.
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot on this,
but
but
I'm fine.
that you're sitting here right now, that I hope that before another task force is introduced and not introduced, but passed into legislation, that those, because I know GITA's under a lot of, pressure and a lot of work. I mean, I worked at GITA. I know what is entailed, and there is a lot of work other than task force that you guys have to do, that it's very difficult. So
I can assure you, though, Senator, that at GITA, we all work hard, and we will divide and conquer. We'll get back to you on the two task force that you're concerned about, and should this task force be implemented, because GITA is the lead, that it also will take an important part of the work that we do.
Right, and that's what I'm boiling down to, is that, you know, this legislature passed these laws to formulate a task force, and a lot of it goes into Gita, you know, that you're responsible for overseeing this, becoming the chair, and then, you know, calling everyone to the table, and it's a lot of work. But there are other task forces too that I haven't heard of, the Tumon Insurance Group, the the Senior Citizen Housing.
Senator Teitigui?
Yeah, so that being said, excuse me?
Can you please just stick to, yes, can you please just stick to the bill?
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
am, Madam Chair. I'm talking about the task force, which this legislation does formulate a task force and its ability to move forward, whether this agency is able to handle this additional task force, you know, to move in on what's already on their agenda. That was my questioning, and I hope that, you know, as we move forward, that they're all paid attention to with the highest priority, especially those who came forward. The other
Yes,
one I had was, and for the sake of time, I'll just scratch a couple other questions that I had. Here it says, Rory, in the section here where it says, once again, the creation of this task force is passed by the legislature and signed into law by Governor Cow will indeed bridge Guam with other neighbors throughout Micronesia. If I'm not mistaken, trying to understand this transshipment is if a load comes to Guam, and instead of stopping anywhere, it comes directly here. While in Micronesia, the ships can go directly to that island, but because of the inability of their ports being able to handle the large shipments like gas, et cetera, like that, would this actually help the Micronesian region in a sense where it goes directly to their islands instead of stop on Guam and then unload and then go to another Micronesian island? I mean, who makes funding here? Who helps who?
Oh, thank you, Senator, for your question. I think there's two different issues here.
Okay.
You correctly explained what happens in the transshipment of containers, and Matson is the only carrier right now that does the transshipment of containers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
Are you talking about to the outer
yeah, to the other islands, based on what Senator Tadegui is saying, is that they come in on the bigger ships, and then they're loaded off the port. We collect fees per the tariff, including the all the other necessary special service requests. And then then those same containers that have to go to the feeder islands is what they call, they're loaded on the smaller carrier, and that's how it's fed. I think the idea of this transshipment task force is whatever could be manufactured on Guam as a result of assembling all of these products, then they can be distributed to where the markets are. And it's not only Micronesian market, but also the United States, Asia. But there would be, the market will drive where the demand is, and that's how those...
Is there any federal regulations or anything that we would have to adhere to on something like this, or is it something that we can do ourselves without the interference of federal laws?
Well, other than the Jones Act, but other than that, those goods would have to be cleared by customs.
Okay. Oh, that's
Yeah,
one of the
importing
major...
and exporting. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was one
Yeah.
of my major things on the federal side. Okay, thank you so much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Teitigui. Senator Joanne Brown, do you have any questions, comments?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be able to ask questions. I was just following up on Speaker Terlaje's point, and I understand and certainly have no issue in creating another upteenth task force in the government of Guam, because hopefully with our current experience in this pandemic, hopefully there'll be some productive outcomes. But it's also, I mean, Carl, you're in the private sector. I mean, there are dynamics that can happen on their own. We're not hand-holding many companies, including your own, to be able to develop business or have business on Guam to operate. And so, I mean, I guess we can create the other task force. I don't know if the intent of the task force is to hire a firm to study this issue and come back, or is it the dynamic of all the members here that are going to contribute to providing feedback? Do you know what the ultimate objective is? Who is going to execute the actual work? Because I see some testimony that seems to reference doing studies. I doubt the task force itself will do the study. Is the intent to hire a professional company to actually do this, or does anyone know?
I think it's going to be a collaborated group. I mean, different sectors come in together and weigh out the pros and cons of transshipment and make recommendations of what's the best options for Guam and what we should do. Like I said earlier, it could be by industry, it could be by product, it could be by commodity, whatever it is. And then we make the recommendation. But, you know, there's some legal aspect that we need to also take into consideration. Setting up business, how do we entice them, marketing that effort. So it'll be public-private partnerships coming in together and working on what would be best for Guam as it relates to transshipment.
Because I mean, at the other end of the scale, I mean, we're out in the Pacific and located where we are, and certainly the shipping companies are well aware of it. I mean, there's certainly so much business that's going to come to Guam, at least historically. And while we use the word transshipment, I think maybe it's a combination of transshipment and export. Because we're talking about seeing what manufacturing perhaps we can generate here on Guam and then be able to ship it to other points of interest, right? And part of it, I'm sure, is marketing. I've always been fascinated. You could be sitting in, say, a cafe in San Francisco drinking Fiji water, and to me, that's just incredible marketing, because I know most of the people in Fiji don't have clean, safe drinking water. So it's interesting how many Americans, including us now on the shelf, now we see it in the last few years, you can buy Fiji water here, but back then it was like a little upscale because, you know, you got it in, you know, San Francisco or somewhere in LA, you could drink Fiji water. But to me, that's just incredible marketing, because if we've been to Fiji, you know, most of the people, the quality of life, including just safe drinking water, is not a reality. So it's just, what is it, Carl, you're in the private sector here, that we're missing? Is it just our location also? I mean, I know with regards to export of agricultural resources, it's always been the issue of getting past the USDA inspections to be able to export off island. Because you would think Asia would find, you know, if they can find Fiji water exotic, why wouldn't they find something from the Pacific just as exotic, if not more so, and plus our close proximity, you know, to the very tourist markets. I mean, they're within hours of Guam. What are your thoughts on that? Because we've had issues in the past. I mean, in the early 70s, we had the watch manufacturing industry here on Guam. We saw in the CNMI for a number of years, they were able to ride that wave with regards to garment manufacturing, even though they were bringing many of their workers from Asia to simply put the US stamp in. And of course, the manufacturing industries in the United States certainly put a stop to that. Took time, but look at where the CNMI is with regards to garment manufacturing. And then we had a very robust fishing industry. And then again, the dynamic shifted with 9/11, the additional security requirements, and you know, they relocated their hub to the FSM. And recently, we've lost the remaining remnants of the shipping, you know, the fishing companies here on island. So, from your perspective in the private sector, what do you think it is? What do you think it is that's prohibiting this dynamic from happening, irrelevant of another task force created by the government? Just the private sector itself being able to facilitate itself.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for the question, and you're coming from a very good and somewhat fresh perspective, you know, in your former chair down at the port. I think from the private sector's perspective, there's not that much, so to speak, that's missing. I think it's just more so like an organization of a plan. And as Joanne mentioned earlier, you know, it's really the public and the private sector working hand in hand and joining forces and lending their expertise in their different spaces to, you know, really just put their heads together. And I hope the task force honestly doesn't try to do too much and doesn't go too wide. And if they zero in maybe on 3 to 5, let's say, objectives and bullet points, and just try to do a couple of things really well instead of trying to do everything for everyone. I myself have sat on numerous task force in my 4 short years, you know, in the government, and you know, to Tello's concern, yeah, that required a lot of time, and you know, every week I'd see what my schedule would look like and be like, oh my gosh, here comes another task force, and you know, where did we come? But to go back and to answer your question, I think all of the elements are there. Sometimes with task force and positive results that flow out of task force, it's really just the organization aspect, and then just being sort of that first mover to kind of push industry to, you know, into the right direction. And once you do that and get out of their way, you know, there's beautiful things that can come about it.
Well, I certainly look forward. I mean, I'll put this on my clock a year from now to see what the progress is. I mean, I'm sure Senator
I
Tello,
like
probably
the-
far more than me, is aggressively following up on GovGuam task forces, because she's created some of them.
I like the time frame too.
But I would be curious to see. I mean, you know, we're coming out, hopefully coming out of a worldwide pandemic. So, I mean, there's some realities that come with that, you know, we're actually in a better situation than many other people, including our relatives and neighbors and friends back in the U.S. mainland. I mean, considering where we're at. So there's some things that are going to be insurmountable if it affects at a worldwide scale. But definitely looking at what these alternate industries are, that where we can, if it's manufacturing, but it comes down to really what the cost is and the price of labor and all those other wonderful things. But good luck. I certainly hope to see something productive come out of it, and you know, you jump over the hurdles that many other task forces have not been able to do, and diligently bring something publicly. But I hope it's maybe something where we can actually facilitate. But again, I also look at the dynamics of private enterprise, and normally the desire is there and the interest is there, and they can see money to be made. They certainly don't need us holding their hand. So I look forward to seeing what the outcome is. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
There being no additional testimony or questions from the panel, we'll now invite the sponsor to close on the bill.
Madam Speaker and Madam Chair, for giving me the opportunity, and thank the panel for being here this afternoon. And maybe just a reiteration for my colleagues that the reason why I proposed this task force is because when the previous administration, the Trump administration, when we wrote to the federal government, they asked me, Speaker, what do you need from us to make this happen for Guam? At this point, it was clear that we needed a clear plan, and we needed our entire government and private sector in Guam to be on the same page so that we, as a team Guam, can talk to the National Trade Council and the National Economic Council, and that the entire, and inclusive of the entire federal government, to ensure that our island of Guam will be included in the bilateral trade agreements with foreign governments. And as the Oversight Chair of Regional Affairs, and knowing that we've been talking about this for many years, is, you know, we've been talking about this, but to date, we're still at the same place. How do we move forward from here? And when the federal government had shared their perspective to me, I said, this is the way that we can move forward. And Madam Chair and Madam Speaker, again, thank you. I think it's important that we get this message across, and we look at the return of investments. The good president of GVB, and of course, everybody in the panel spoke about the need and why, and even about probably the savings that Guam could have based on Carl Pangilinan from APL's presentation. So I know we're up against a lot of time, Madam Chair, and I'm really hoping that I can get my colleagues to help jump on the bandwagon of this, and thank everybody for showing up. So, Sanamasi.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. We will now, everyone in this panel is free to go who are discussing. Thank you, First Lady. Thank you. And we can start bringing in people who would like to testify on Bill number 46-36. Go ahead and have them sit at the table, and I will read the title for Bill number 46-36 COR, which is sponsored by Therese M. Terlaje, Jose Pedo Terlaje, Telena Cruz Nelson, and Christopher Dueñas. Bill number 46-36 COR is an act to amend subsection 66-212 Charlie of Chapter 66, Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, relative to encouraging construction of homes by extending the validity of a building permit for a minimum of 12 months. Okay, at this time, I would like to call forward those who would like to testify. I see we have Ms. Campos. Ms. Campos, please go ahead and proceed with your testimony. Just state your name for the record. Say again. Oh, forgive me. Sorry, Speaker. Ms. Campos, as you were. Speaker Terlaje, please go ahead and introduce the bill.
Hafa Adai, and thank you, Madam Chair. especially for the hearing on this Bill 46-36. It's sponsored by myself, Senator Jose Pedo Terlaje, Senator Telena Cruz Nelson, Senator Christopher Dueñas, and I thank my co-sponsors. So under the current law, a building permit lapses and is void if work authorized is not commenced within 3 months after its issuance and may only be allowed an extension for a maximum of 3 months by DPW. And so this bill would extend the allowable time to 12 months before a building permit lapses and is voided. I want to note that it was just pointed out to me by the Department of Public Works that there's another conflicting code section that allows up to 6 months. So in any case, I would like to amend the law so that we give at least a 1-year period with the possibility of extensions to that because often there are delays, Madam Chair, in the construction that may go beyond these allowable time periods due to unforeseen circumstances that affect these, the homeowners to be. So they require the homeowners, if not renewed, to get their permits renewed, or it requires them to start all over again. And we all know that the permit process currently is a time-consuming process, and every delay in it costs you money, changes prices, everything changes. So this would allow homeowners some flexibility, hopefully save them some time from having to renew a building permit that was already approved. And as you know, these delays are often beyond the control of those homeowners. And we've seen this especially during COVID. That was so very clear when agencies had to shut down and construction, many things were complicated. And so that happens throughout, even prior to COVID, there are financing issues, contractor issues that go beyond the control of the homeowner. So I know that the government's been looking at ways to streamline the permitting process and assemble a task force to improve this process. And the report from the task force showed that the time it took to process a new residential house permit was about 4 months, and for permits for commercial renovations, it was about 6 months. So this bill is consistent with that intent to reform and streamline the permitting process and make it more convenient for those who are trying to build homes. The bill does not take away the regulatory responsibilities of the government agencies, as they will still need to conduct their review and inspections as authorized, and the bill merely allows homeowners and property owners flexibility if their construction projects are delayed. So they will have a few more months under that existing building permit. Cesar Masi, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now we will call on Ms. Gina Campos to give testimony, and then Director, you can follow immediately after. Just please ensure that you state your names for the record.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Vince Ariola. I am the Director at the Department of Public Works. Very pleased to be here. Honorable Senators, good to see all of you. Madam Speaker, good to see you. If I may, let me just read the testimony into the record. I'm pleased to appear before your committee today to offer testimony on Bill number 46-36. As I understand it, this bill, if enacted, would extend the effectiveness of a building permit for a minimum of 12 months. So if for whatever reason construction has not started based on a specific building permit, it appears construction will not begin within the current 3-month period, that permit may be extended another 12 months to also include an additional 4 extensions of 3 months each. This would mean a possible maximum extension of 24 months. At least that's the way I'm reading it. Okay? With the current pandemic status that we are faced with, coupled with keeping our island economy moving, I have to believe this action would benefit a number of construction activities. We are all acutely aware of all the delays, suspensions, and deferrals of almost everything that we have gone through and will probably continue for some time. I do wish to point out a section in the current IBC that appears to conflict with the language in the bill, and as the main sponsor said, we can work that out through in committee. So by virtue of the IBC adopted by Public Law 30-25, the building permit essentially expires after 100 days or 6 months as opposed to the current 3-month or 90 days. The Guam Department of Public Works doesn't foresee any negative issues with the intent of Bill 46-36. However, we do suggest clarifying the concern regarding Section 105.5 of the IBC. Thank you for the for allowing the agency to offer comments on the bill. Vince Ariola, Director at DPW. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Ms. Campos?
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm here in support of this bill, but I'm here to ask that, I know you've got a task force right now, and I want
Can you
to-
speak into the mic, please?
Okay. Is it better?
And go ahead and state your name for the record.
My name is Gina Campos. I'm here as a realtor and as a citizen. I actually am in the building process right now. In December of 2019, I started my building permit process. At the time, you know, being a realtor, I understand right now that trying to buy an existing home is quite expensive. So my children are in the process of building their homes. And at the time, I started the building process with the thought that if I were to apply under self-construction, that not only would it be quicker, that we would save money. And I'm here because I support this bill, but I'm also trying to bring up an issue that is important to me, both personally and as a realtor. I have the opportunity to work with many families, and so I see the struggle that they're going through. And actually, going through the building permit process myself, I want you to know that I started my permit in December. I got my building permit in August of 2020. And I want to say that I feel that I know people, right? Don't they say if you know people, it goes a lot faster? Well, trust me, I was in there all the time trying to know people and see if I can push the process even faster. And that's what this was my experience. And so imagine normal working people who are trying to go through this process. There is a problem. This addresses the end of the problem. It doesn't address the beginning. And I'm here because there's a lot of local families who've got property. And again, I'm going to say that I appreciate this effort, but I want the legislature and I want DPW to start at the beginning. Why does it take 8 months to get a building permit? I have another family who's been calling me. You know, they see me on TV, so when there's a problem and they get frustrated, they call and ask for help. I can't do anything except call other people, but I'm gonna try. And her issue is her family is trying to move their parents out of a 2-story. They live on a 2nd floor apartment. They're trying to get a permit to enclose their carport so her mother and father could move in. It's been 4 months to get a permit to enclose a carport on an existing home. So, senators, I applaud you for paying attention. Could we go to the beginning and figure out what's wrong with the system? I support this bill, thank you, and that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Campos. Is there anyone else that is going to give testimony on this bill? No? Okay. Speaker, you're welcome to...
Sure. I want to thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your patience while we were hearing another bill prior to this. But especially, Ms. Campos, I appreciate very much about the beginning of the process. And I have looked at the task force that made a report as to how we should all get together to solve that issue. So I am looking forward to not just legislation, but one of the biggest recommendations in that task force report was to put things into electronic mode and not manual, and so that they would be routed quicker throughout the agencies and at the same time, every agency, as opposed to sequentially. And so that's one of the things I think that could be implemented as soon as the director is able, right? And so that's an administrative coordination that they could do. And so I'm very much looking forward to that and hoping that can occur. But I do agree, if there's more we can do as a legislature, I'm looking very carefully at the task force recommendations and listening to people like you as to what is their practical experience. So I very much thank you for your testimony, and we will not ignore it.
Well,
just Masi.
I just want to share one other thing. You know, because I'm doing a self-construction, you know, I'm there for all the inspections. I'm there for the process. And let me tell you, the people that are showing up and doing the work, the people that I deal with, they all want to do a great job. They're all really trying. They're putting in their best effort. The problem is not the people, it's the bureaucracy of the system that is getting in everybody's way, not just in the building permit process, but also in the occupancy permit.
Yes.
Last year, the government of Guam only issued 143 residential building permits. That is an incredible, incredible issue, because we all know that there's a housing situation here in Guam. And there's so many people that want to contribute to fixing this process. We just need a means to be able to get in there and participate. But I'm telling you, the people that are in place, they do a great job, but the bureaucracy of this system is overwhelming even for them. I just want to share that, and I promise I'll shut up now.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ariel, were you trying to also speak or no? Okay, that's it for me, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to call Senator Adda now if he has any questions or comments at this time.
I don't have any questions or comments, Madam Chair. Thank you.
And at this moment, I'm sorry, forgive me, Senator Shelton, the Legislative Secretary, I did not notice you came in. I'd like to thank you for being here today. Senator Taidagui, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I definitely appreciate your testimony today. Every time you come in, it says a whole lot and things that need to be addressed, so I appreciate it. And I too went to this task force that was implemented with, I think Bert Johnson was part of this group, and listened to some of the issues and the bureaucracy surrounding it. So, I mean, that was the nemesis of my ARC legislation that was ultimately vetoed, but anyways, I appreciate it, and thank you, Mr. Director, for also being here, and I'm sure you're taking notes with regards to this issue, so appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Taidagui. Senator Joanne Brown, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I mean, this is really interesting. I've been in DPW, and I've also been at Guam PPA, some of the two more challenging agencies that you need to get a building permit. This is not a new process. It really isn't. It's not that complicated. I mean, I understand if you're dealing with major, mega, Menangan Hills-sized projects, a hotel, a golf course. If you're dealing with single-family residential homes, it really shouldn't be that complicated. So maybe since we have the director here, I'm going to take advantage of you, Mr. Ariola, because you are here. It's a rare moment to have a director here that I can ask you a question of. But what is the delay for a single-family residential home to permit? Is it getting inspectors out there? Is it, reviewing housing plans for a standard 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home is not that complicated.
No, it
isn't.
isn't.
So what's the clog in the wheel?
It isn't. As you know, you were there. Basically, if everything is aligned, if everything is available, all the information is available per code, per local statutes, takes anywhere from 8 to 10 days. Review by other agencies. But we do have environmental issues, we have floodplain issues, we have easements, we have rights of way, we have property ownership, we have certifications that are needed. For electrical work, for plumbing. We have issues that have to do with ingress and egress into the roadway. I mentioned this, property issues. There's a lot of issues that come up in construction, and we have to get those addressed. I don't know specifically. Gina's Ms. Campos. Her building permit process, but you can bet your dollar when I get back, I'm going to find out exactly what happened and why it would take 8 months. 8 months is certainly long. That's way long. I'll admit that, but I have to imagine there were just other issues that entered the picture, because in talking with the staff, and she's correct. The staff just wants to do a good job. They want to take their paperwork from this desk. They want to review it and get it off and get to the next one. That's the God's honest truth, because there's a lot. And I'm not sure where you got your number, Gina, but we entertained almost 800 applications last year, from April to March of this year. Of those, 670 were issued building permits. So that's an average of, what, maybe 50, 60 a month? That's a pretty good clip. And is it taxing on the agencies? Absolutely. You know, there's 7 or 8 agencies that do the review process, from land management to agriculture to environment. And you know, there are a lot of issues, property issues, that I can tell you right now. If there's a citation on a certain property issue, let me give you an example, because it happens to our roadways as well. If that tiny little snail that's on the endangered species list, or a certain tree is on the property, your project stops. If there's ancient remains that are on your property, your project stops. There's a lot of SHPO issues, a lot of environmental issues. So I don't know exactly what transpired with Ms. Campos, Gina, your thing, and I'll certainly look into it. But again, if everything is in line, it really should take 10 days to 2 weeks at max from all agencies, fire included, EPA, but most often than not, there are a lot of other issues involved. We get plans for a beautiful executive home built, put together by an architect, registered, peeled, everything, the whole works. The entire electrical system is missing. So there's a lot of human error there as well. So, you know, we have to deal with that. And do I want to kick out building permits as fast as I can? You know, of course I do. Who doesn't? You know, we, especially with this COVID issue facing us, as Gina mentioned, you know, we are a catalyst for construction here in Guam. Construction never stopped during COVID, except for maybe 2 weeks when we had that huge spike. But Public Works, the permit section, the CIP section, we have to assist the construction industry in continuing to move. And so I've told the staff knows, we are the catalyst for construction of Guam. If we don't do our jobs and construction stops, real estate stops, that is not good for us. Yeah.
You know, I appreciate that, because there's nothing you're saying, you know, that hasn't existed since Public Works issued permits. Probably now a few more requirements maybe, because we're more environmentally sensitive, and you know, the issue of the snail is not an everyday thing. Probably a little more maybe historical resources, but again, we're talking standard, you know, residential homes. If it's an individual home and not a subdivision, or you know, 4 or 5, 6 houses that we want to build. I mean, it's just bringing to light, it's not new. What I have seen is government, as time has gone on, even with all this new technology and this modern technology, is we're less efficient. When we were back to, I see it as less efficient in some areas. When we were back to the basics, things happened. And I don't know if where that, you know, clog is in the wheel that's preventing routine operations of government from happening. I can't imagine average people, what recourse do they have? Who do they go talk to? You know, who do they go air their concerns with? So I don't know, maybe for you this testimony is enlightening as well, that you're gonna check with building permits and find out, is her circumstance the only one, or what is the issue? And anyway, maybe we can ask you, Gina, was there any unique circumstance to your property that may have caused a delay?
There is a unique circumstance. My property is located in the area where that Parks and Rec considers that there's remains. Mm-hmm. There weren't any. The property's been investigated, but here's what I saw that I thought really delayed the entire process. Mm-hmm. When I submitted it, I was told to have plans to turn into all the agencies, and there are 8 of them that have to take a look at the plans.
You have to have how many sets, yes.
Yes, so I was told submit to all 8 agencies, and you start at DPW and you give a copy to all 8 agencies. What I noticed, and I thought in my mind that because each agency was tasked with a different part of the process, that they would look at their section independently. And so you're right. I mean, if I'm EPA and I only look at what EPA looks at, that should take me a couple of weeks. But what I noticed was, when I went to EPA to say, my plan's been here for a month, is there any result? The question was, well, has Parks and Rec signed off? Well, no, I'm still trying to get an appointment with Parks and Rec. Well, when they sign off, come back. And that seemed to be the the general process with all the agencies, well, has this department signed off? Well, if they haven't signed off, then come back after they signed off. So that's what I ended up doing, is focusing on the agencies that were giving me the hardest processing time, processing situation. I would have to continuously follow up with them until I had an appointment, then I met with them. And Parks and Rec is a whole different animal. That's a whole different ballgame. So is EPA, you're right. But that's what happened because the other agencies wouldn't sign off until those guys signed off. I ended up having to finish with those guys, which took me about 4 to 5 months. Then after that, I went back to everybody else and processed the document through. And so I found that to be inefficient. You all are independently looking at something, some different part of the plan. Why don't you stick to that part of the plan? But that is not that's not how they treated my plan. And I'm finding, talking to other contractors, that that's kind of how it is. There are some agencies that are known for being a little bit harder to process through. And so you have to wait for them and then move on to everybody else. And like I said, the people that do I see that the people that are there that are doing the work, once you get to them, they really want to help you out. The problem is getting to them. I'm telling you, the bureaucracy is really frustrating. And I realize now why a lot of people end up not building. It is so difficult. And now the cost. And by the time when I started my building permit to when I got my permit, the cost had gone up about $40,000 just because of the time delay. So anyway, I know you guys have something else coming up at 3:30, and I just want to thank you. And I am happy to participate with any task group for free if that might help somebody, because I'm done. I'm applying for my building permit right now. So I'm done, but I'm hoping I could help somebody else.
Well, thank you for your testimony. I mean, it's enlightening, and it's unfortunate because maybe that's why we have so much illegal construction that's unregulated out there, because it's easier to do that than go through the government process. But certainly, I mean, we have a key director here of the agency ultimately that will look at that final document that's circulated and they put their final stamp of approval on a project. Maybe that's something I'm sure you're tasked with, Mr. Arreola, of working with to help facilitate, because that's disheartening. Especially imagine young people trying to go out and get a construction. They're asking mom to help out or dad to help out because the government is just so not user friendly. Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to ask questions on this issue.
Thank you, Senator Brown, and thank you, Mrs. Campos. Senator Shelton, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions right now, but I do appreciate the testimony today. I think especially your answer to the last question to help us break down what are the other issues that we may be able to address through this legislation. So I appreciate both of your time today.
Okay, I just have one question for the director. How many certified engineers do you currently have at DPW? How many certified engineers do you have at DPW? Correct. Can you speak into the mic? May perhaps turn it on.
We do not have any certified engineers. We do have, except for one, who is our acting chief engineer.
Okay, and the personnel that take a look at the plans, the building plans at DPW, do they have extensive qualifications in understanding these plans, or are they just on the job trained?
No, they've been there for a long time. They have, I can tell you right now, the holdback is not at DPW, and it's not because I'm here.
Do they have certifications in the areas that they work for to approve plans, or is it on the job training?
It's not on the job training. They don't have certification, but they've been there for a long time.
So it's experience?
Yeah, right, through experience. They're not PEAL certified.
But they haven't received any formal education to receive certifications to review plans?
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you. Speaker, do you have any closing comments you'd like to say? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Campos. I appreciate your testimony. I wholeheartedly agree with you, and we are going to work to fix this issue, as I am the oversight of DPW. So Mr. Arreola and I are going to be having meetings in the upcoming week, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arreola.
All right.
We'll now adjourn our public hearing. It is now 3:53 in the afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon, and God bless.